It is time for another edition of the preseason watch list here on the Audible, the footballguys.com podcast. It's 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you should give a damn about, we talk about right here on this show. And, well, if you've kept up with us over the years, you know we go never eat sour wheat. So it's the North. We did the NFC North yesterday, Bloom. It's time for the AFC North today. Now, on iTunes, we're cutting these shows up in individual teams. On YouTube, thank you for watching our YouTube channel and subscribing and hitting the like and all that kind of stuff. We're actually doing it once. We'll try not to make this a Steelers show, though, Bloom. Okay, we'll get to the Steelers eventually, but let's try not to make every team in the AFC North a Steelers show.
No, and I think that that's easy because this is a really intriguing division. A lot of things in motion, including with the Steelers, but we'll save that for later.
We will save that for later. We are starting with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, we hate the Ratbirds. Sorry if you're a Ravens fan, but it also comes with a healthy dose of respect, right? Like every time I think of Baltimore, it's like, man, I hate that team. I want the Steelers to beat them every time they play, but I respect the hell out of that team and certainly their coach and all the players they're in. Lamar Jackson up there at the top. Now, we've been listening for drum beats, Bloom, right? Every year off season, what are the drum beats? Drum beats about Lamar Jackson haven't been good. You know, he's not completing passes the way they want. And that's the problem. We know Jackson's super, super athletic, all those sorts of things. But will he get better as a passer this year, not only to help his team, but for what we care about, Bloom, to help out his fantasy stock?
And that's the interesting thing about projecting this team is we know they're not going to be as run heavy as they were last year. That it was predictable in the playoffs. It led to the end of their season. And now Greg Roman has more say over this offense. And the other good news here in this offense is the offensive line is back and it's a good offensive line. Orlando Brown. Isn't it great to see Orlando Brown Jr. in a Ravens uniform?
That's cool, man.
Kicking ass on the wild side the way his dad did. It's beautiful, and who cares about athletic measurements for offensive linemen? Just can he win his battle? And Orlando Brown can. And they've got a lot of good players on this offensive line. So Greg Roman unlocked the value of Tyrod Taylor as a passer. He unlocked the value of Colin Kaepernick as a passer. So this is something that sets up for Lamar Jackson to succeed and for this offense to have more balance this year. Lamar Jackson's rush attempts may come down a little bit, which might help with durability. It's an underwhelming group of targets for him to throw to, but we saw him be fantasy relevant last year, barely throwing the ball. So if he's throwing the ball more and hopefully with more efficiency to less quality targets with no John Brown out there or Michael Crabtree, Lamar Jackson still deserves our consideration as a quarterback to start off in a streaming. Here's the thing, and I brought this up early in the offseason. First 3 games: Dolphins, Cardinals, Chiefs. So, I mean, how could you have a better schedule for a quarterback to get off to a hot start, for Greg Roman and everything he's installed to get off to positive momentum off on the right foot? So I'm fine with Lamar Jackson. You can get him quarterback 15 or later, see what happens those first 3 weeks in easy matchups, and then go from there.
That sounds like a DFS play.
Yeah.
Early on in the season, that's for sure. We're going to get to the targets, but what's the matter with Baltimore? Why can't they ever get any quality targets? It's been a while since, Steve Smith was there.
Right. And it's funny, Cecil, because I was just, for the Broncos, it's a Broncos show, I was just looking at how Joe Flacco has latched on to all of these veterans they brought in Baltimore: Mike Wallace, Steve Smith, Anquan Bolden, even in his rookie year with Derek Mason. So there's not that guy for Lamar Jackson, but when we get to the tight end section, he may not be a guy, he may be a man.
Right. The man Drew. And by the way, it's preseason watch list. So as we're watching, and I was talking yesterday, did the fan war room, so got to interact with fans there in person that came out to watch the show live. And there, it's preseason. What does preseason mean anything? I had that question. I was like, the preseason matters. The games don't count, but the preseason matters. And you know what we'll be doing? We'll be watching to see who's Lamar Jackson latching on to. And that's what the preseason's about.
It is the chemistry, and then also like the play design, the hot zones on the field for him. And look, if you go back and watch Lamar Jackson last year, the accuracy stuff is way overblown. He was fine. He has a narrow base, so it kind of tricks your brain into thinking that he's spraying the ball over the field, but especially to the middle of the field, he looked good. And again, I think Greg Roman has a good track record of setting up these dual threat quarterbacks to be very efficient as passers.
Well, behind him, Robert Griffin III. We know his game. We know that probably shouldn't be playing, and Lamar Jackson stays healthy. He won't. Trace McSorley is there, and there is kind of a trend in the NFL. We talked about this on the live show, Bloom, maybe a month ago or so, about like these teams that are trying to find their Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Well, there's Trace McSorley. Saw him at the Senior Bowl. I mean, it's kind of one of those Logan Thomas. It wasn't as bad as Logan Thomas at the Senior Bowl, but it's like one of those like, what doesn't fit here? So you're watching all these quarterbacks, and then you watch Trace McSorley, like, he doesn't fit there, but maybe a Taysom Hill like fit.
Maybe Danny Etling comes to mind, a Bayou Bengal up there in New England. Bill Belichick, there's nothing he's not ashamed to copy when he sees something that's good there. So, yeah, I think that's something to watch there, how they use McSorley. And look, Robert Griffin III at least gives you the running ability. And if Lamar Jackson goes down, and because of how much he's used as a runner, it's more likely than other teams. Griffin, at least as a 1 week plug-in, or those 2 quarterback leagues, super flex leagues, where you're drafting and stashing some backups because of quarterback scarcity in that setup, Griffin deserves a second look.
To the running back positions for the Ravens, and well, here's Mark Ingram coming over from the Saints. Going to be weird seeing him in a Ravens uniform, but here he is as the lead back. Let's get to the others later, but let's discuss what Ingram has left in the tank this year and in his first year with his new team.
And it's interesting because this is a running game that was very fruitful last year. Look what Gus Edwards did. Ingram's going to be better than Gus Edwards. And Edwards was over 5 yards a carry. We know it's going to be a run-heavy offense. We know they've got a good offensive line. So that all sets up Ingram for success. They paid Ingram basically like a starter. I think that really they wish that Ingram was still here in New Orleans, but there were some misunderstandings, miscommunications. But he's falling to the 5th round, even though the volume should be there, even though it's a good situation, because he's going to turn 30 this year. And I think, Cecil, at this time of year, what helps guide you in those moments when you're on the clock and you're just flustered is some high-level sorters. One of them is a good offensive situation, which Ingram has going for him. But another is a player in the upside or peak part of their career. And Ingram's not there anymore. And in fact, it's better to be a year early than a year late with these old running backs. So I think that's why you see Ingram falling to the 5th round, maybe even later, sometimes going in the 4th, which bakes into his ADP the chance of a drop-off as the year goes on. And also, even though this team has a high rush attempt threshold, they will generally split it up, what we saw last year, not just between Lamar Jackson and the lead running back, but also a second running back. And I think that's where we can make some big gains in this offense for our fantasy team.
Yes, and that's where we look. Not necessarily to Gus Edwards, Bloom. To me, he's like the elevator music of running backs. It's like one note, one beat, one. It's fine. Usually, I love big backs, and Gus Edwards is a fine back. But Justice Hill is the player to watch. Kenneth Dixon been around forever. We've talked about him a ton on this show. I just don't think he can stay healthy. Bring up Tyler Ervin if you want, Bloom, although he won't make the team. But Justice Hill is the player to watch here. The Oklahoma State rookie, 4th round pick, and a guy that beat out Chris Carson when he was at Oklahoma State. So he's already been used to working within a committee, working within a backfield, and trying to work his way up the depth chart. Hill at 5'10", $198, has more dynamics. I don't know what to say, but he's more well-rounded than, let's say, a Gus Edwards, classic banger, rugger, right between the tackles. Justice Hill is a player I'm watching for in the preseason.
Yes, and he's a player that is vastly, vastly underrated in fantasy drafts, and he's someone I find myself gravitating to when you get him in the 12th or 13th or 14th round. And his outlook isn't that different than Darrell Henderson in that, does he need more than 10 or 12 touches a week to be fantasy relevant? And if he does what we know he can do with those 10 or 12 touches, does that turn into 15 touches, 18 touches? Because like Darrell Henderson, what's exciting here is go back and watch the Ravens last year, blasting open holes, massive holes, putting defenses on their heels. They didn't have someone with Justice Hill's initial burst and long speed in that running game. Does Justice Hill turn some of those runs that Gus Edwards was making, 12, 15-yard runs into 70-yard touchdowns or 50 or 60-yard runs? I think it's very possible. And I think whatever the plan the Ravens have at the beginning of the year of how they're going to divvy up carries, Hill might just make them tear that up and say, we've got to use this guy more. So the situation's there, the talent is there, the opportunity is there. It's exactly the kind of player you should be targeting in the second half of your draft.
Well, you know what I'm thinking, Bloom, and this may be off base, but it's in a stylistic form. I'm thinking of Vince Young, Lendell White, and Chris Johnson.
Sure.
Okay, so who's Lendell White minus all the weed? Mark Ingram, maybe he smokes. Who, by the way, who cares at this point?
Right.
And
you live in Colorado.
I live in Colorado, right? And then you have, who's your Chris Johnson? It's clearly Justice Hill. Any of these other guys, is it even worth talking about Ken Dixon anymore?
Well, I think that we're going to keep whoever makes the team as the third running back, whether it's Edwards or Dixon, on our waiver wire speed dial because it's a plug and play situation. But I also think that in a numbers game with lots of turnover at other positions and experience, running back will probably lose out. And I think that it's very difficult to see Edwards and Dixon both making the team, although they could make another team after the Ravens let them go.
Now you got me thinking a half pick. Give me a pound of your sweetest Chiba. And by the way, I consider Lendell kind of a buddy now. He is excellent on air, excellent, and he smells like the sweetest of Chiba. Like that's like his cologne.
Wow,
what do you wear? What is that? What are you wearing there? Drakkar? No, no.
Pineapple Express.
Purple Koosh. Darth Vader. Sorry, Joe, for all these weed references, but hey, we're talking about Lendell White. Let's get off the sticky icky and get to the sticky hands. What a transition.
Perfect.
Marquise Brown. And here's the thing about this group of wide receivers. There is a lot of talent. They're just really inexperienced because they're young. They're inexperienced. And there's Willie Snead. But the young guys, Marquise Brown, we'll get to Miles Boykin in a second. But Brown, when healthy, still recovering from his surgery, should be good to go for week 1. Bloom, correct me if I'm wrong. There have been no setbacks, anything like that. And that was always the plan when Brown had the Liz Frank surgery. Antonio's cousin and a player that's electric in the open field, just a playmaker. So I think of Jackson. I think of, running those short routes. He could take a 5-yard route, turn it into 80-yard touchdown. There's a lot of excitement around Marquise Brown. Just, is he healthy? When will he be fully healthy? Can he stay healthy?
Right.
And can he, get up to speed in the NFL? Kid like that with his playmaking ability should be able to fit right in. So he's the top target. I suppose Chris Moore is on the other side, and he's a 9-route specialist. He always has been. We've talked about him before on the show, but let's break down those two before we get into the backups.
Yeah, and really, Cecil, I'll even take the ball farther down the field than that and say we can treat this as one big take because there will be 0 or 1 wide receivers that are fantasy relevant in this offense. And when we look at the darts you can throw in the second half of your draft, if you are going to throw one at the Ravens, as much as I like Marquise Brown and love the long-term fit with Lamar Jackson in this offense, I think it's asking a lot for him to be up to speed for week 1. I think it's asking a lot for him to make an impact in September or October, September at least. And is it worth tying up that roster spot for the reward, whatever that reward's going to be? Because if you take Marquise Brown, you're pretty much committing to taking him until we see him get up to full speed. And I doubt he's at full speed, or at least fully integrated into the offense. The chemistry is online between him and Jackson. You also have Miles Boykin. He missed the spring with a hamstring, so we're going to watch that closely. But it's Chris Moore who's been there. Chris Moore getting praise from the owner. Chris Moore also, on an efficiency standpoint, playing a very small number of snaps, having an outsized impact. And he is a good downfield receiver. And wouldn't it just make sense? I mean, this is what Greg Roman should be thinking is you're pulling everybody up, you're pulling the safeties up, and the safeties also have to think about Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst. So you have Chris Moore one-on-one, play action, you're throwing that post, you're throwing that go, and Chris Moore just needs to convert those every other week to be fantasy relevant. So if you take a Ravens receiver late in your draft, it should be Chris Moore. And then, if it's a dud week 1, it's a dud, and maybe being tied up by Xavier Howard is an issue. But I do think that that's the only Ravens receiver we're taking. Willie Snead's going to get enough targets in the middle of the field to not necessarily make him fantasy relevant, but make him relevant for this offense. And then you have these, Michael Floyd's on this roster.
Right. There's their old receiver that they pulled off the scrap heap.
Right. Seth Roberts is another slot type.
I was thinking of Jaleel Scott. Jaleel Scott. Didn't we talk about Alan Lazard earlier on with the preseason watch list? What was it with big receivers last year? They were just crushed. At least Scott was drafted. He was a 4th rounder, but still.
And they've got Jordan Lasley. So, there's a lot to watch here. And if we see one guy emerge, that's the guy to target. I think that it's more going into camp probably. But going out of camp, we might not have any clarity. And obviously, in what should be a higher volume, but still low volume downfield passing game, it might be one to just pass on completely.
Yeah, Joe Horn Jr.'s there. So, yeah, don't forget about him.
Antoine Wesley.
Right. So, dynasty-wise, sure. Redraft-wise,
Yeah.
You said 0 or 1, Bloom. I'll cut it in the middle. I'll say half, Eddie.
Half.
There's half a receiver that you want. I want Marquise Brown half the time. I want Miles Boykin half the time. I want Chris Moore half the time. Anyway, when have we ever rushed through wide receivers? Not that we rushed, but when have we ever been like, wide receivers because of these tight ends? We're doing that with Baltimore because of Andrew, because of Mark Andrews, and you love it. I mean, Hayden Hurst there last year, the first rounder. Andrews is the fourth rounder, whatever. But you saw his connection with Baker, the baby maker, in college, and then he took that to the pro field while Hayden Hurst was banged up. Then Hayden Hurst came back and just didn't look that effective. And Hurst is one of those guys, still learning the position. Got the yips in the Pirates minor league system.
Baseball references.
Exactly.
I don't even have to spit out after you did that.
I know. I don't even know what the yips are, but he got him. Well, and now he's kind of got him as a pro because Mandrew is the guy. Mandrew is the top tight end. We'll see if Hurst develops, but Mark Andrews is the one I get most excited about.
And what we really have here is chemistry. And wouldn't it just make sense to build on that chemistry? I know Hayden Hurst was a first-round pick, but Hayden Hurst was somebody that a lot of us didn't have projected as a first-round pick. And if you watch Hayden Hurst at South Carolina and you watch Mark Andrews at Oklahoma, I wasn't clear to me that Hurst was the better prospect. And we now have a year of NFL football of Andrews to see how efficient he is and how explosive for a tight end he is. So he's that guy to look after 10 tight ends or so off the board. Again, because of the early schedule, doesn't it just make sense that against Miami's linebackers and against Arizona's linebackers and against the Chiefs linebackers and safeties, that Andrews should be the number one target in this pass offense when you have number one target and tight end? And if you look on an efficiency standpoint, Andrews was outstanding for a rookie tight end. Rookie tight ends have trouble making impact, but if you look at the projection from year 1 to year 2 in terms of targets, Andrews looks like he could be the breakout tight end if it's not Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, if it's not Dallas Goedert, it'll be Mark Andrews. And, Ravens, here we go. It'll be interesting to watch and see how that team develops this season. We'll be watching closely during the preseason. That's what this is, the preseason watch list here on the Audible. It's 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you want to know about, we talk about right here on this show, and we gush about them if they're Mark Andrews. And then we get to others as well. So that is a wrap for the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to move on in the AFC North as we continue. And, quarterback coaches are getting hired left and right to be head coaches. Does it work, or do the Bengals go with mostly Mixon in 2019? That's next.
Give me 1 second. Hey, everybody, live TV. Let's all go to the lobby.
So this is live TV as we wait for Sigmund Bloom. And as I deal with the sore throat, I'm going to grab some handy dandy hauls. So you look at all the stuff behind the scenes you guys get to see here on YouTube. On the Audible, we clean all this stuff up on the audio version. It's like clean it out, take it out. But this stuff, no. So any young broadcaster out there, if you get a sore throat, throat coat tea and Halls. That's basically how you get out of it, or try to work with it anyway. So yeah. So how are you guys doing? I'll be going to Broncos training camp later today, 2 p.m. to 4:45 Mountain Time, as Vic Fangio does afternoon practices. So still don't think that's a great idea because we get thunderstorms here like every day. Bloom, that's why I got sick. That's why I got the football flu, is because I'm driving around with my soft top on my Jeep, and I don't have the windows in.
Yeah.
So it's like anytime it rains, you're just like, oh, I'm Getting rained on while I'm driving.
And it comes from any direction in Denver. It's the most unpredictable weather. Well, in New Orleans is pretty unpredictable too. It can be going north to south, east to west, west to east, south to north. By the way, Joe Everett, one of our favorites, is asking about the Nick Boyle talk. And the Nick Boyle talk is he's a 6 tackle or 6 offensive lineman. Pretty much trying to put 6 tackles out there for Baltimore.
Yeah. Joe, what's up, dude? All right, we'll go on with Cincinnati in 3, 2, 1. The preseason watch list continues as we talk the Bengals now. 32 teams, 32 episodes, every skill position player that you want to know about. We talk about right here on this show. Bengals talk. Zach Taylor talk, Bloom, and really Andy Dalton talk. Kind of a boring player just overall in general. But now Tyler Boyd getting paid, AJ Green getting healthy, new system, exciting running back that we're going to get to that can really dominate. How does this affect and impact Andy Dalton? Is there actually more there than we would normally give him credit for?
A lot more. And from the big picture, there's a lot of exciting things and a few bummers. So the bummers on the offensive line, because it was really exciting to ponder Jonah Williams, plug and play left tackle, had followed him, fell to the Bengals in the draft, which would then make Cordy Glenn move inside to guard. Although why not right tackle? And you have Billy Price, last year's first round pick, healthier than last year. Clint Bowling retired, but Christian Westerman should be a good replacement. But this offensive line still probably won't bottom out like the 2017 Bengals. But what's really exciting is Zach Taylor. And if you're reading what's going on in the offseason, you're hearing, and Brian Callahan too, who's a coveted offensive young mind in the era of offensive young minds rising up the coaching ranks. Fun is being talked about. There's excitement. And it really just makes sense, Cecil, to just take the Rams offense and apply it to the Bengals offense. That's what they hired Zach Taylor to do, and they have the players to do it. Brandon Cooks, John Ross, Tyler Boyd with his new extension, Cooper Kupp, AJ Green, whoever the hell AJ Green wants to be, Joe Mixon, Todd Gurley. And that doesn't even account for what Tyler Eifert can do or what Giovanni Bernard can do. So even though the offensive line at best is adequate, Andy Dalton is a good extension of the coach quarterback, just like what Jared Goff has done, where the coach is almost remote controlling the quarterback. You have the right plays called. If the players execute and the coach makes the quarterback, see, there's the Freudian slip. If the right decision is made in the structure of the play, it's successful. Andy Dalton knows how to be that kind of quarterback. It's outside of structure where Andy Dalton struggles. So I'm excited to see this. Not quite as excited as before Jonah Williams got hurt, but this could still be a lot better offense than what we saw last year. And see, with a defense, this is where we talk a little defense, that might get them into some shootouts.
Right. And when you mention Andy Dalton and everything that's good and bad, it sounds like you're talking about Jared Goff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, take him when you're not talking to him in the headset and you can really confuse the guy. All the Patriots did in the Super Bowl is, one, they stole Vic Fangio's game plan. And then 2, they crowded the line of scrimmage because football doesn't change. Like, everyone's like, McVay, and I shook Sean McVay's hand and I had teams calling me. I'm kidding, but still, like, that's how it's been perceived. Like, all this wizardry and it's awesome and revolution. Like, now it's 18 and 19 handoff out of 3 wide receiver sets out of 11 personnel. That's what Sean McVay does. It's the most basic and simple thing you can do in football. And all he does, he like puts in a motion or a jet sweep. You know what I mean? So it's like still basic
it's
football.
The players. It's the quality of the players executing the play.
Yep. And it's how defenses are responding to the motion. And they're still running 18-19 handoff. So with this team, especially with Joe Mixon, we'll get to in just a little bit. I mean, Bloom, I'm just glad Cincinnati did something. What would you say you do here? There's an Office Space reference for Marvin Lewis. God bless you, Marvin Lewis. Great guy, but it had been stale for years. Mm-hmm. Now at least the Bengals are trying something.
Yeah, this is what we talked about yesterday in the Green Bay episode. It's the invigoration of we've moved on. And in the football community, how many years have we been saying, is this going to get Marvin Lewis fired? Is this going to get Marvin Lewis fired? And then that creates excitement for someone like John Ross, who was butting heads with Marvin Lewis. And also just the idea of this team, this offense moving into the 21st century.
Let's talk about the backup quarterbacks briefly. Used to like Jeff Driscoll. Then we saw more of him play, and I was like, yeah, he's not going to make it. Ryan Finley, I never liked his game. Was he Senior Bowl too? Jacob Dogala is the interesting player to me here. And again, it's preseason watch list, so we can get a little crazy. But Central Connecticut State and he's 6'5", 235 pounds, that big pocket presence. Also, not that the Patriots, Kevin O'Connell or whoever, name whatever Patriots quarterback that didn't work out, the Patriots were, interested in this kid. So when I first started looking at him and writing about him for Football Guys, I was like, I'll keep an eye on him. Interesting size, undrafted kid. So there you go.
Yeah, and I'll say this I think they moved up in the 4th round to get Ryan Finley. So if Ryan Finley doesn't far and away win the backup job, then the Bengals miscalculated there. But as you said, they may luck into somebody else like DeGala.
All right. Now it's Joe Mixon time, because Joe Mixon's a show, right? Joe Mixon is the guy, the centerpiece. The talent is there, certainly in the intent as a runner, all those sorts of things. And as we've seen last year, top 10 fantasy back, number 9 in standard scoring leagues with those 43 catches, 1,100 yards on the ground, 9 total touchdowns. This year for Joe Mixon, it could be more. Now, on the ground, let's just say 1,200. But as a receiver, let's say 55, 60 catches. Yeah. That's not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, when we map him to Gurley, we see maybe more downfield targets. We see getting out in more routes. So I was really excited about Mixon before the Jonah Hill. Where am I going? Moneyball? Super bad. Anyway, the Jonah Williams injury. And I still think Mixon, and look, Mixon drafters are cooling on him. I'm seeing him falling to the 2nd round, even the mid-2nd round, occasionally the late 2nd round. And I'll take a chance on him in the 2nd round because the talent's there. He finished strong. The offense should be better. He should be used more creatively. I suppose there's some threat of Giovanni Bernard. Giovanni Bernard's one of the best backup running backs in the league. He can start for some teams, Tampa Bay. But at the same time, if we look at the model, the template, it's not really for 2 backs. This is what we're going to have tested with the Rams. So I'm fine with Joe Mixon as a 2nd round pick. I was even fine with him as a mid-1st round pick before that Jonah Williams injury. And he's a player that is just getting into his prime. We've seen him get banged up a little bit each of the first 2 years, but he's still young. And this could be the year that we see him get to a new level.
You're on the clock just after the turn. Yeah, Gurley and Mixon are there. Who do you take?
I'm taking Mixon right now just because now look, there was some talk. Steve Weish was talking to some team insiders saying that there's no plans for Gurley's workload to be cut back or production to be so perhaps Gurley's ADP is going to start to bounce back. But I still would go Mixon, and I'd go Mixon over Melvin Gordon if you're going to ask me that.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, and God bless anyone that comes out to any training camp and does any sort of digging. Because in the same report, and again, wrote about it at footballguys.com, it was like, there's nothing to see here, people. I mean, they are going to use the other guys more, but nothing to see here. Everyone, calm down. He's 218 pounds now. Like, okay, like, well, what is it? Because you just said 2 things.
Right.
You just said 2 things that are exact opposite. They're not going to change. I mean, sure, the other guys are going to get more work, but they're not. Nothing there.
Except for that. Yeah.
Right. It'll be totally the same, except completely different. Next, Gio Bernard. We just got other guys, whatever. Gio Bernard, man, come on. I mean, he is a good running back. I guess 2nd team. I guess
right.
Still he'll have to fall into something, but I'd love to see him with a starter's workload, Bloom.
Yeah, and the sad thing is when we say the other guys, whatever, I mean, the other guys are really interesting here. I'll just get them out of the way. Trayvon Williams didn't look that different than, say, like a Devin Singletary with a little.
I did like Singletary a little bit more with his intent. Trayvon likes to dance a little bit.
Right. No, you're right. But I'm just saying, like, roughly is the value that can be added.
Right.
And Williams, for a smaller back, has a hard-nosed mentality. Great pass blocker. If you were going to isolate one thing about Trayvon Williams that made him stand out in this class is a smaller back, a bursty back, but a great pass blocker, which gives him some different applications. And then Rodney Anderson, who would have been one of the top 3 backs in this class, if healthy, probably a redshirt year for him. But look, with Giovanni Bernard, 2 years ago, he was kind of a best ball darling at a mid-round ADP because of his pass catching ability. Then last year, he really took a backseat to Mixon. But remember, Mixon's been hurt each of the first 2 years. So just as a clear handcuff, because anytime Mixon was out, we were projecting Bernard as a top 10, top 12 running back for that upcoming week. And most of the times he delivered. So he's one of the most essential handcuffs out there. And for a guy behind a guy who has missed some time, if they do get creative and use him more, then he becomes more of a PPR best ball factor at times. And he's probably one of the best 25, 30 running backs in the league. He just happens to be in a situation where he's blocked. May he be freed soon, like another AFC North running back, Duke Johnson.
Quentin Flowers, by the way, the converted quarterbacks there. So, preseason watch list, crazy deep dynasty. I'll be watching.
Yeah, Darren Hall even. There's preseason DFS.
Yeah, there we go. Regular DFS, you're starting AJ Green because you love the guy. Just stay healthy. That's the only thing with AJ Green. Really reinvigorated with this system, with this offense. Let's throw in Tyler Boyd in the conversation. Just getting paid. Now, how does he respond as the Bengals quickly wrap him up? They've got the talent. That's the thing. They've got the talent. A defense to put him in some shootouts. And they've got the coaching staff that gets him into the modern era. How do AJ Green and Tyler Boyd respond?
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting offense because, as usual, it's hard to talk about Green and Boyd ceiling without talking about Ross and Eifert. Because if Ross and Eifert can play half of the season or more, then the ceiling for the whole offense and Dalton goes up, and probably Mixon, more scoring opportunities, more longer drives. But the ceiling for Green or Boyd, even though the efficiency per target would go up, probably goes down. So these are variables. And we saw last year with Green going down that Boyd rose to the occasion and he got his extension earlier this week. Pitt wide receivers back in the saddle. So I think that Green is there in the third round for you. And on one hand, when I say AJ Green third round, you're like, well, whoa, where do I sign up? But as we've been talking about, and we will talk about more and more this summer, the third round running backs are beautiful. You can get first round production out of a third round running back this year. So as much as I like AJ Green, I'm probably looking running back in that round. Tyler Boyd is in a tier with guys like Jarvis Landry, Chris Godwin. And again, where I'm looking at Tyler Boyd, he could outproduce 6th round ADP by a round or two, but could he be like, say, an Allen Robinson or a Christian Kirk and greatly outproduce that ADP? That I'm not sure about. So I think that Boyd is more like swinging for a single or a double, but the Bengals have confidence in him. The Bengals thing, see, so we're back to saying the Bengals know what to do. You extend these guys before they get to free agency. 4 years, $43 million. That's super reasonable for a player where Tyler Boyd is in his career arc. So kudos to them.
Yeah, kudos to them. And, well, maybe kudos to John Ross if he ever puts it together because of that speed and the ability to take off the top. He's supposed to be Desean Jackson and has played more like Freddie Jackson. Anyway, backup receivers, interesting names. I've watched Hunter Sharp up close. Like, okay, we'll watch him, or, quick route runner, all that kind of stuff. So who do you like from this? Cody Core? Like, who are some of your favorites here?
Well, Ross is the guy to target late in your draft. And look, I think that Seattle, they might open the season with Seattle, who's now going to be without their best pass rusher for the first 6 games. Going back to, facing a team from the Pacific Northwest where he played his college ball. I think John Ross is worth a pick in the last few rounds of your draft. One of the things you have going for him is Marvin Lewis just didn't seem to like him. And now with a new coaching regime, a fresh start, clean slate, John Ross and some of that talent could rise to the surface, and he's in an offense that should deploy him in a better way. And again, defenses have a lot more to think about than just him, especially if Tyler Eifert's out there. So I want to see what happens with John Ross. But like you said, Cecil, interesting names here. Josh Malone, 4th rounder from 2 years ago, has some downfield ability. Cody Core could make the team just on his special teams contributions. Auden Tate, a red zone wonder, a big receiver that can win at the catch point. But also a guy, again, that Marvin Lewis seemed to be kind of jerking around. So he could be somebody who develops some more momentum. Stanley Morgan Jr. We got Reggie White Jr., Joe Horn Jr., Stanley Morgan Jr., Matt Waldman favorite, which always makes me take note because you can look at this depth chart and Stanley Morgan could be the number 4 receiver as early as this year, as early as week 1, as he's a highly polished, a versatile receiver, a good all-around receiver. So a lot of fun stuff to watch here when the Bengals are on the field in the preseason.
Let's talk about the tight end situation, which means Tyler Eifert, or more appropriately, CJ Uzomah. But it's with Eifert. I mean, It's the same story. Just stay healthy. Uzomah, people may be shocked, but he was the number 19 fantasy tight end last year with 43 catches, 439 yards, and 3 touchdowns and 62 targets last year. So it's kind of the same old rinse repeat Groundhog's Day with Tyler Eifert. Here we go. And then, oh yeah, watch out for Uzomah. We'll get to Drew Sample in a little bit.
Yeah, Eifert, we know he's got the ability. Actually, he was really just rounding into form when he got hurt last year. And it was more of a freak injury, not so much a fragility injury. So I'll be watching to see what the reports are on him regaining form. Because we got the geriatric tight ends this year. Take your pick, right? If you're not going with Mandrews or Dallas Goedert as your upside play, you've got Greg Olsen, Jordan Reed, Jimmy Graham, Tyler Eifert, Jason Witten. So Eifert, I think, actually is probably the most talented pass catcher the last time we saw him of this group in terms of his ability to regain his old form. But another injury, can he do that? Uzomah, they bring him back, and he's going to be a serviceable player. But Cecil, I like this, that finally Josh McDaniels says, finally somebody else took a blocking tight end in the second round.
Right, there we go. So here we go, Drew Sample from Washington. Maybe he'll be like Will Dissly, right? Give you a surprise game only when they play the Broncos, though. I guess they're trying Moritz Boringer at tight end. Is that right? He's listed as wide receiver or tight end. Yeah. So, hell, it's preseason watch list. Of course, we'll be watching.
Yeah, and Ethan Carter is a Matt Waldron favorite who they still have around there. But Sample, if you're worried about the offensive line, Drew Sample should help, especially in the running game. And see, whatever happened to Richard Williams?
The world may never know.
Yeah. More flexibility than Brent Selleck.
Right. Are you talking about Richard Quinn?
I'm sorry, Richard Quinn. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, because
he was the second. He was the second round.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I remember they traded back in to the round, and it was my last draft at Dove Valley, and so the lights came on. They weren't supposed to pick. It was the final pick. And then I was like, I thought it was going to be Lamont Jordan, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like Richard Quinn. I'm like, oh my God, the guy that caught 12 passes in 4 years at North Carolina. Way to go, Joshy McD.
Yeah.
Anyway, tiny little guy, poor little guy. He's like the bagel guy, except for he coaches football. You're not God or my father or my boss. Bill Belichick, you are my boss and my father. Anyway, that's a wrap for the Bengals preseason watch list. 32 teams, 32 episodes. Every skill position player that you want to know about, we talk about on this show. The hottest team that everyone is picking to make a run for the postseason is the Browns. But does it actually come to fruition? Do they all play nice and do they produce? That's next. 3, 2, 1.
Joe Everett says Sample was Disley's roommate. True story.
Very good. All right, 3, 2, 1. Everybody's talking about the Browns, going on and on and on. It's cool, Bloom, right? We got a lot of Browns fans that are listeners out there, and it's been a while. If you're a Browns fan, you are tried and true. Let's just say that, because it's tough to root for that team, and now there's a ton of excitement. So before we jump into Baker the Baby Maker, all that preseason watch list, 32 teams, 32 episodes, blah, blah, flipper, everything you know here, Bloom, like, it'd just be good if the Browns actually pulled it off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, factory of sadness, factory of smiles. And I've been encouraging Jared. Love you, Jared.
Love that guy.
Matt Waldman, still, as much as he hates it, sometimes can't let go of his Cleveland roots and the Browns and everybody else out there. Because lots of great analysis. See, it's one of those things like the fans of teams that have less to root for their team become great analysts because you still want to stay interested in the sport, but you don't want to be depressed all the time. So enjoy this off season. Enjoy all the pregnant anticipation, whatever comes of it, because this is the most exciting off season since the one that ended up with Tim Couch becoming a Cleveland Brown.
Now you've got Baker, the baby maker there, Baker Mayfield as a quarterback. What's he do for an encore this year? When you saw last season, and I think there was a report, it was on our newswire. I thought it was a little bit ridiculous because it's like he only needs 42 touchdowns to break Dan Marino's record of 68 over the player's first 2 seasons. I don't think anyone should be projecting him for 42 touchdowns. Like, if you want to say 32, cool. He had 27 touchdown passes as a rookie last year. 32, yes. 42, Bloom, I think This is where the Baker Mayfield hype's getting a little bit much. I do like that Brett Favre is like, hey, I kind of see myself in him. Yeah, that's true. And Baker Mayfield with better weapons around him, which we're going to get to when we get to the wide receivers. Certainly, running back position is going to be interesting. By the time you listen to this, hell, Duke Johnson may be traded as we're recording this. Right. But with Baker Mayfield, what are proper expectations, proper projections for the second year star?
It's okay to get carried away with some of the hype because Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator. Obviously, Freddie Kitchens and Mayfield are riffing, and you add Odell Beckham to this offense, and now the possibilities are limitless. Offensive line, Greg Robinson is your left tackle. Trading away Kevin Zeitler and Austin Corbett plugging in, maybe not. So. And this we'll get to when we talk about David Njoku, how that could affect his prospects. So offensive line, a little bit of an issue. But look, this should be an offense. What did Todd Monken do? I mean, Tampa offense was one of the most potent pass offenses in the league with Ryan Fitzpatrick last year. But some of it's because of the weapons, and they have weapons galore in this pass offense. So if all the weapons hit their expectations, the Baker Mayfield should be a top 5 or 6 fantasy quarterback. But I still think that if you're looking around him at ADP, I mean, does it really feel good to take Baker Mayfield like a round after Deshaun Watson or a round before Kyler Murray when you look at the upside of these guys, or Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers? I just think that you're betting on different things, the lack of the running upside. I still think he can unlock the value of the receivers, but if we're looking upside at quarterback, there's probably more attractive options right around him at the same time on the board.
The nice thing about Baker Mayfield is that he always wants to go for the throat.
Yeah.
And that's something like if you're playing in that sort of league where, okay, you want safe or you want the guy that's going to go for the throat. Pick your poison, Blue.
Yeah, and that should translate to projecting best case scenarios. And I'll do the transition. I'll tee up the segue for you, Cecil. Projecting best case scenarios for Nick Chubb, because even though this could be more of a high flying pass offense, that means more light boxes for Nick Chubb, and it means more rushing touchdowns to finish off these drives. If they do proceed to take the division, it means more games that he gets to finish. And 8 games of Kareem Hunt don't scare me if Nick Chubb's on the board in the second round.
Man alive, Bloom, you hate the backup quarterback, so you skipped right over him.
Yeah, well,
because Garrett Gilbert.
Can I say that I have a Chubb? Oh, no. Sorry.
Sorry. That is a big sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
Maybe David. That's a big Joe. Maybe David Blow. We're all 12. We're all 12. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe. I apologize. David Blow, I guess. Preseason. Stop. Blau. Let's just pronounce his name somewhere different. Before we get to Nick Chubb, we got to talk about David Blow, whatever.
At least it isn't a quarterback whose first name is BJ.
Very true. Joe, but hey, buddy, can you stop with those BJ references? Joe, buddy. Thanks.
We love you. No, but that's they got Drew Stanton, whatever. I mean, look, it's like the second hour of the Thursday night show is back. But yeah, and I think Mayfield should be durable, and this is one of those situations where obviously the bottom drops out of the offense if it's Drew Stanton.
All right, Nick Chubb. Here we go. Before Kareem Hunt and after Kareem Hunt. Whatever happens with Duke Johnson Jr. is whatever. New representation, Rosenhaus meeting with him, blah, blah, blah. From what I know, and this was, a couple months ago, Bloom, they had him out there and no takers, like nothing serious, no interest in Duke Johnson Jr. So it's not like the Browns weren't trying. It's just that nobody out there was interested. Again, that's what I heard. We'll see if someone changes their mind. We'll see if someone gets hurt in camp.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That's it.
But let's talk about this backfield as a whole, with Duke Johnson Jr., without Duke Johnson Jr., with Kareem Hunt, without Kareem Hunt, and then Nick Chubb there. Nick Chubb is the guy, one of the most naturally talented runners in this league. Just keep him healthy, and you got a grinder with great upside as a starter.
If there was no Kareem Hunt in this picture, Nick Chubb should be a first-round pick, and maybe even as high as like 6th, 7th, 8th pick overall. And you're going to get that value for the first 8 games of the year, and then you have the uncertainty about when Kareem Hunt returns. But look, Nick Chubb's still going to be the goal line back. Nick Chubb is still going to be the guy at the end of games grinding it out. Nick Chubb is still going to be the guy in the based offense that you want running against those light boxes. Nick Chubb's still a fine receiver, so Kareem Hunt is almost a luxury here. So Nick Chubb in the second round, put it on the board, and look. these in the second round, you want to get somebody who's going to produce like a first rounder. So you know that Chubb can do that for at least 8 games, maybe longer if the Browns' offense is prolific as we hope. Dalvin Cook's a guy to consider in that same vein. Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy to consider in that same vein. If James Conner falls, so Chubb I think is a slam dunk pick in the second round. Kareem Hunt is a little tougher. I think it depends on this is a know your scoring and rules and league size, because if you have a thin waiver wire, say 16 roster spots, then what you're giving up by having Hunt tie that up for 8 weeks is a lot. 20 roster spots, 12 teams, then you maybe are a little better off keeping Hunt to see what you get. Because come week 6, week 7, and week 8, everyone's going to want Hunt, and everyone's going to be excited. And a la Darrell Henderson, a la Justice Smith, if I'm Justice Hill, my brain. Then you have Kareem Hunt. If he only gets 8, 10, 12 touches a week, he could still be fantasy relevant. But the chances of Nick Chubb going down are low. The chances of Kareem Hunt being a league winner are low. And the chances of Duke Johnson even being fantasy relevant, if he's with the Browns, very low. But I'll echo what you said, and it's what Ian Rappaport said, that when there's an injury in training camp to a running back for another team, that the situation is fluid. So whatever the Browns say, they're just waiting for a market to develop for Johnson services.
Right. And they don't need him because they have Dontrell Hilliard.
Yeah.
At least that's maybe what they're thinking. And certainly with Hilliard, it's got the juice, right? As the scat back from Tulane, who has impressed his coaches and teammates. So, no Duke Johnson Jr. God. Dontrell Hilliard. Let's go.
You're going to see him as the passing down back at times if Duke Johnson is traded. And like you said, his development and the way the team feels about him makes it even easier for them to pull the trigger on a trade if they can find a dance partner.
Speaking of dancing, Odell Beckham Jr. dancing in the end zone and doing it for the Browns this year, coming over with Jarvis Landry. Now they actually have a quarterback. It's like at LSU. Like, why couldn't LSU win with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr.? Yeah. Oh, yeah, Zach Mettenberger. Sorry. So now they have a real quarterback. What's this dynamic duo going to do? Because again, there's getting carried away with what you think of the Browns, and then that's looking at them rationally and logically. Still getting excited, Bloom. But what's the true story here?
The true story could be more exciting even than our most exciting projections. And they also are reunited with Adam Henry, their college wide receiver coach. So it's a big reunion, and he's at a reunion with an actual quarterback. Odell Beckham, another player falling to the second round who can produce like a first rounder. I mean, you're picking near the turn. You can start like Julio and Beckham. Oh, man. Because maybe Odell Beckham doesn't get the same target load he got with the Giants. But what can he do with a real quarterback? We don't even know. We don't know what this is going to look like. Go back. There's some good, I don't know who it was that put up a good montage of Eli Manning missing Odell Beckham wide open deep time after time after time. And we know that Todd Monken is going to have an aggressive pass offense that's going to set Beckham up for success. And we know that, and maybe what happens here is that defenses continue to focus on Beckham, and then it's more Landry and Callaway, who I'm really excited about, and maybe David Njoku and Seth Duvall or Rashard Higgins even. But Beckham could easily have a 25% reduction in targets, but a greater than 25% increase in efficiency because of Baker Mayfield and that aggressiveness. And then you have Landry. Landry's going to be more value per target, but the targets are going to stay lower. So he fits into that same group. Again, Tyler Boyd, Chris Godwin, where you're swinging more. I mean, Godwin might actually be a home run based on what Arians is saying, but I still think that Landry's upside is capped and he's more like swinging for a single. He's a fine wide receiver 3 who's going to have some upside weeks, but he's not going to vastly outproduce ADP. But when you start seeing the pieces in this pass offense lineup, you quarterback and the aggressive mindset of a Todd Monken, then it is a reason to get excited.
Get excited about Antonia Callaway, especially if you're playing a performance league, Bloom, as I know you do, where you get rewarded for those big plays, because Callaway's the type of guy, again, 5-yard drag route, 85-yard touchdown. So exciting to consider what he could be this year. There's Rashard Higgins. There's Hollywood. He's been working with the first team because, Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry have been missing time in the offseason. So Higgins getting more of a opportunity to build chemistry with Baker Mayfield, something important to remember in case there's injuries on top of the depth chart. You go, who was the guy that worked with him the whole offseason? Oh, that was Rashard Higgins. He's a talented player. Boom. connection.
And the connection you should be making with Antonia Callaway is to Desean Jackson, because that's the role he can play in this offense. And let's remember, in terms of clean slate players, Jackson didn't seem to have a lot of affinity for Antonio Callaway, was messing around with his head. He was banged up. I don't know if Antonio Callaway was really 100% going into the year last year at any point, and he'd been away from football. So we may see an entirely different Antonio Callaway this year than we saw last year, and in a role where he's going to be facing one of the weakest players in the opposing secondary, an opposing secondary that's going to be focused on other players. So Antonio Callaway could easily be a guy a la, say, Tyler Lockett, who only gets 70, 80 targets this year, but still is a fantasy wide receiver 3 and an upside fantasy wide receiver 3. Then Higgins is a great name to keep on your waiver wire speed dial, because they have him. He can play inside, he can play outside. Cecil, you know him from Colorado State. He's a great route runner, a professional, a technician, but also a player that is showing Matt Harmon smiling somewhere, because he's also showing that whatever physical limitations that he was thought to have in the NFL, it's not really limiting him. So the only thing limiting him in this offense is just a chance to get targets. If they didn't trade for Odell Beckham, we'd be talking about Rashard Higgins as an interesting sleeper this year, and all it's going to take is an injury for us to talk about him later this year.
Makes me think of Preston Williams. We'll get to that. Is this a Dolphin show? Have we ever said that?
Yeah.
I don't know. We've talked about Jalen Strong before.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys you're like, wait, he's still in the league?
Yeah.
But he's there. And again, preseason watch list.
Sure.
You bet I'll be watching to see if Jalen Strong can stick this time.
Yeah, and Damian Ratley, who got some playing time last year. So, injuries can happen. Players can get elevated up the depth chart. And is it okay if I say that there's at least a little bit of overlap between Jalen Strong and N'Keal Harry? A little bit?
All right. Don't make Patriots fans mad.
No.
Anyway, let's move on from the wide receivers to the tight ends. Now, you teased it, Bloom, industry term, about how the offensive line lack of being good at football might make David Njoku more of a blocker than people want. I assume that's where you were going. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is, and Njoku also, because he's so early in a potentially very high arcing career curve, could also just come out and be someone who's so dominant that how can you deny this guy the ball? But Vernon Davis was the same way. And Vernon Davis,
Mercedes Lewis the same way.
Yeah.
Daniel Graham the same way. Brandon Pettigrew the same way. Like these guys that are great blockers, and they're like, oh wait, you can block? Oh, I don't tell me they're going to do that to David Njoku. Don't tell me that.
And I might not happen, but when Greg Robinson is your left tackle,
it might happen.
It might happen. And also, and I bring up Vernon Davis because Davis, he was Calvin Johnson or Vernon Davis, who's the ultimate combine stud. It's one of the two of them. And Vernon Davis even looked like that on an NFL field week in and week out. And it only in a few years was he used, really only 1 year, I think. And it was only because of a big touchdown spike that it mattered, that he ever come close to his fantasy ceiling. So even a player who athletically adds so much value to each target, when they're needed, especially like, what does it make more sense to do? Have David Njoku rip the seam, but also potentially give up catastrophic pressure on the edges, or just have David Njoku block? And David Njoku is a better blocker than Demetrius Harris. He's a better blocker than Seth Devolve. If you're going to have somebody ripping the seam, Seth Devolve makes a lot more sense than David Njoku. If you need someone to stay in as that sixth offensive lineman, and then that unlocks the value of the Landry, Beckham, Callaway combination, along with the scheme, along with Baker Mayfield if you want Baker Mayfield to be an aggressive downfield thrower, you have to give him at least like count to 3 before he has to throw if you're going to have a downfield throw. So that's why I'm worried about Njoku. It might go another direction. If you're looking in that part of your draft at a tight end, Jared Cook, maybe even Vance McDonald ahead of David Njoku.
Well, in the backups, you mentioned self-devalve there. Demetrius Harris, Bloom, you've always had a little twinkle for that guy, so let's talk. Yeah,
and he's got good hands, and he's the kind of player, Demetrius Harris is the kind of player that you imagine on a 2 tight end set that everyone just forgets about, and he's wide open in the middle of the field for 15, 20, 25-yard gain, as we would see with Kansas City at times. So obviously there's some sort of desire here to have more 2 tight end sets. Doesn't exactly bode well. Maybe Jarvis Landry. I'm not sure how that's going to go with snaps, but it's another reason maybe to feel a little less comfortable with Jarvis Landry and a little more comfortable that this team is going to vary the personnel sets. Spend on Demetrius Harris. Seth Devolve is still there, so they can mix and match a lot of different looks, and that's even if Duke Johnson is traded.
I feel like we should all go Han Solo on Browns fans, Bloom, because it's like, hey, we got a real quarterback. Great kid. Don't get cocky.
Yeah, not yet. But the odds in Vegas are cocky already.
What do they got them at?
I think they're favored to win the division and one of the top Super Bowl winning teams. But some of that is that just taking advantage of Browns fans' optimism. I still think bask in it, folks, and enjoy it. Enjoy every day before the season starts. Before these expectations have to be put to the test.
Let's move on, and that's a wrap for the Cleveland Browns in our preseason watch list. It's 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you want to know about, we talk about right here on these shows. Well, it is a Steelers show. Yes, it is. And what does this team look like without downtown Antonio Brown? Who's to step up behind Juju? We've got some names. Do they have the games? That's next. That was super corny.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Bloom, wave your terrible towel. It is time to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the preseason watch list. 32 teams, 32 episodes, every skill position player that you want to know about. What's our Steelers meter at, Bloom? Like, where excitement level? Because for me, it's always like this nervous trepidation with this team. But they had Bell, Brown, and Ben. Never won a damn thing. Now no Bell. Now no Brown. Still got Ben. Still don't think they'll win a damn thing. But anyway, Bloom, where are you at?
Well, the lawyer in me comes out and says, if you want me to argue this positively, I'll say that the distractions and everything can be put behind them and they can just move on and focus. There was a point earlier in the offseason, was it Ramon Foster or Pouncey that said, hey, we're going to handle everything that was actually put out publicly, that we're going to handle everything privately. And just the fact that had to be put out there showed you the culture needed to be repaired. But if the culture is repaired, then it's potentially exciting. This team's going to be competitive. We always know the Steelers play up to their competition and play down to their competition. So maybe the Browns setting a new standard in the division could be good for them. What I'm mostly looking for is does this offense become more creative under offensive coordinator Randy Fichtner? Did they use some of the different looks and combinations? Because they can't just rely on Brown and Juju now like they did last year, the spike in the passing game numbers. And then do they rely on just one running back like they have over the years? So there's some questions in how to project this offense. Are they going to look like the old Steelers, or are we going to see a new Steelers?
Oh, I'm thinking of distraction. I was like, well, aren't Ben and Mike Tomlin the distractions? Like, are we looking at the problems when we look at the head coach and the quarterback?
Yeah, like sometimes the thing that all of the failures have in common is you, Ben Roethlisberger, or you, Mike Tomlin. But again, now we're getting to the neurotic Steelers fan part of the show.
Yeah, let's just do that. Because with Ben Roethlisberger, it's like, okay, without Antonio Brown, what does that look like? And is he going to throw it 700 times again, Bloom, or is it going to be something much different, much more conservative this year?
So I think that we have to look for some sort of drop in targets back to his historic levels of more around 600 to 700. So that's a reason to fade him at ADP, even though his ADP is lower than his production level lately. The reality is this. At quarterback, no matter when you're picking, if you're picking 5th, the quarterback off the board, 10th, 15th, even 20th, you're looking at ceiling. And I just think Roethlisberger doesn't offer the same ceiling as some of the running quarterbacks, some of the younger quarterbacks that might be on the upside of their career. But he's a very stable value because of the offensive line. I know Mike Munchak's in Denver. I hope getting to cover Mike Munchak. That's exciting, man. But they've got Sean Sarrett, who's been Munchak's disciple, protege for a while, so that shouldn't be an issue. They've got great continuity, great talent on the offensive line. So it's a very stable situation, except that Roethlisberger has to figure out who that number 2 target is, or has to rely, or maybe he doesn't, and maybe this is how you get to the negative side of things. So Roethlisberger's a fine fantasy quarterback. He's a fine fantasy quarterback to unlock the value of Juju Smith-Schuster and maybe one other guy, although we'll talk more about how to attack that. And of course, keep this offense moving so that James Conner can get his touchdown opportunities. But at the same time, I just think there are more exciting fantasy options on the board around where he's going.
I think that's where the excitement lies in the wide receiver core, because there's a guy that it should be, and then there's a guy that might just take it from him. Anyway, we'll get into that in a little bit. Behind him, never been a fan of Mason Rudolph, the pick there. Josh Dobbs, the egghead quarterback. Devlin Hodges? We're talking about the Samford passer. Like, I'm, it better be Ben. He better stay healthy, even if the Ravens break his face again, because I don't think Rudolph can play. No. Dobbs is just a guy, and well, I guess we'll watch Devlin Hodges.
Well, the good news is if it is Rudolph, he's more of a stationary pocket passer, and they have a good offensive line for a stationary pocket passer. So it might not be as disastrous as when it was Landry Jones.
You can't even beat out Josh Dobbs last year, though.
I know. Can we move on?
Let's move on to James Conner. Everybody should be a fan of James Conner, and the Steelers should feed James Conner as well. But we're going to screech the brakes here, Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
We have to throw in Jalen Samuels.
Sure.
Like you can't look at this offense like we've been talking. No Le'Veon Bell, no Antonio Brown. You can't look at this. No Jesse James. You can't look at this offense and go, "Hey, that Jalen Samuels, he can do everything." Nah, why would we use him? Like James Conner should get his, but Bloom. I believe this. Maybe the Steelers don't. I believe Jalen Samuels should be much more involved than people think.
So Cease, and this is where we can walk through this hand in hand together, like we have walked through life. We psychoanalyze this team, right? And maybe we're psychoanalyzing ourselves on the couch here, neurotic Steelers fans. But there's rational coaching. There's 21st century offenses. Here's a 21st century offense with the Pittsburgh Steelers personnel. Sometimes you have Deontay Johnson and Dante Moncrief and Juju Smith-Schuster and Vance McDonald out there pushing this field vertically. Sometimes you have Eli Rodgers or Ryan Switzer out there and Jalen Samuels out there taking advantage, nibbling at the short and intermediate stuff, getting into mismatches, get them on players that can't match them, can't check them one-on-one. Sometimes you have Jalen Samuels starting the play as a tight end and ending the play as a running back or vice versa. And you're giving the defense a lot to think about. You're doing a lot of does it sound familiar? Like what you're seeing every week from successful offenses. A lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of deception, a lot of creating mismatches. Tactically deploying your players. Now, what we see more from Ben Roethlisberger when he's in his comfort zone is, I'm just going to target my guys. Likewise, with the backfield, it's been all one guy. Bell, Williams, now Conner. But you have Jalen Samuels and even Benny Snell. And I love James Conner. And Jalen Samuels has ended up being an excellent backup as a runner, better than expected. Benny Snell, there's probably not that much of a drop-off if you're talking about between the tackles runner behind this line. So maybe they mix in him. It makes sense with James Conner wearing down by December last year to ease back a little bit. And it makes sense for the tactical advantages that having Jalen Samuels. Let's see some plays. What I want to hear in training camp in Latrobe Cease is some plays where Conner and Samuels are on the field at the same time. Will they do that? Will it be the same old Steelers who say, this is how we do it? Probably. But Samuels is an excellent pick in the 10th round or later to see what happens. And Conner, you can get him in the second round now. It's probably pretty good because, unfortunately, I think betting on the Steelers to be the same old Steelers and giving them one running back 80 or 90% of the snaps and touches is probably more likely than the Steelers evolving.
It's all about declaring. You want your opponent to declare when you come out in a heavy package. Let's say it's 2 running backs and 2 tight ends for the Steelers, right? You're 22 personnel. But one of those backs is Jalen Samuels. Like the defense will respond perhaps in a way where they stay in base because they're like, we got to stay heavier because they're in a heavy package. They got 2 tight ends, they got 2 running backs, but you're actually not in that, right? Because Jalen Samuels can split out wide and run routes like a receiver. You can throw him in the slot like that. That's what every NFL team. What does Sean McVay do? And all the magic and the motion, and he runs 18 handoff. What's he doing is he's trying to make you declare. We're going to keep you light because we have 11 personnel. We have 3 wide receivers, but we're still going to run the most basic down your throat 18, 19 handoff. That's all it is. Football doesn't change. It gets dressed up. And now the Steelers, are you going to dress it up? There's drum beats, Bloom, that we hear in the offseason that we don't like. It reminds me of a drummer that I grew up with. I was a drummer in high school for Grover, David Martin. And I'll call him out by name because David was always offbeat when it wasn't supposed to be offbeat. He'd be on the 1 and the 3 instead of the 2 and the 4. And David was awesome because he never cussed. And if he was mad, he'd be like, Judas, because he wouldn't say the name of our Lord.
He would never have to say, sorry, Joe.
Exactly. He would never say, sorry, Joe. He'd just say Judas all the time. And he couldn't drum to save his life, David. You're a terrible drummer. He'll never hear this. One of the terrible drum beats is the Benny Snell stuff. Like I was talking to Biggie, my best friend, and my best friend, Peyton Manning, and he was like, hey, you got Benny Snell. I was like, yeah, but I would have rather had Devin Singletary because he's a Bills fan. Or give me Darrell Henderson, right? We had to get Benny Snell. So what have we heard this offseason, Bloom? Oh, they might use Benny Snell.
They love him.
Benny Snell. Hey, I'll love him too, and he's making plays. I just kind of a boring runner, Bloom.
Yeah, between a boring burst, not necessarily a guy that adds a lot of value to his touches. I bet they love the guy that he is. He's just a Steelers guy, and you know what you're getting. And you're getting a guy who, imagine Benny Snell like in the Sony Michel role in New England. He'd be fine. He's going to run the plays as drawn up. He's going to be a disciplined runner. He's going to be a hard-nosed runner. He's a productive runner. And he was a productive runner in the SEC on a subpar team. You know who that sounds like? Ralph Webb. They already had Benny Snell. His name was Ralph Webb. Yeah. He's still on the roster. And I think if we watch preseason games, preseason DFS, everybody, Ralph Webb, you might be watching like, whoa, that must be Benny Snell, their fourth round. No, that's Ralph Webb, who is a very good running back and didn't hang on with the Patriots. So it's all a Patriot show.
Yeah, well, it is preseason watch list, and they got Trayvon Macmillian from CU. Watched him at the local pro day there for the Broncos. So, preseason watch list, any of these backup behind Benny Snell and Ralph Webb that should be watching.
Oh, Trey Edmonds could make the team as a good special teamer. And then you got the Edmonds brothers from the fabulous flying Edmonds family of football. But yeah, I think that the Steelers have an embarrassment of riches, which is kind of depressing when they spent a 4th round pick on a running back.
Very much so. Juju Smith-Schuster spend all the picks. You get everything on Juju because he's awesome. Here's the thing with Juju, Bloom, and maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me if you believe otherwise. His numbers really aren't going to change that much. They can't really go up that much. Like they honestly can't rise much higher. And I love Juju. I would love it if those numbers do. And maybe I'm wrong and you can totally correct me. But they'll probably be about the same with this offense. The reserve receivers, let's wait on those. Let's wait on those.
Sure. One take, names.
But let's talk about Juju and what should you be expecting more? No, Antonio Brown, he's going to get everything. Or with everything that he did last year, like how does he top those numbers?
So this one is tough because you have a wide range of possibilities for Juju Smith-Schuster. But I say within that range is number 1 fantasy receiver overall this year. Also within that range is lots of games where he's frustrated because teams say, we're going to take away Juju and we're going to make somebody else beat us. Like Keenan Allen was basically saying, like, man, you're going to see your job's going to get tougher. But I end up taking Juju in the early mid-second a lot these days because when I clear my mind, and I just think about Ben Roethlisberger and Ben Roethlisberger's playing style, is there a rule that a wide receiver is not allowed to get 200 targets in a season? I don't think so. Ben Roethlisberger can extend plays. And doesn't it just make sense that even if teams are bracketing Juju, that Roethlisberger is just going to wait until he sees that little window? Think about all the tiny window throws he made to Antonio Brown over the years. Think about all the throws he made to Antonio Brown. We're like, no, yeah, okay, great, yeah, just count on Antonio to make the play. Now, will Juju rise to that level? I don't know. I mean, we may see Roethlisberger throw 20 interceptions because he's forcing the ball to Juju, but he will force the ball to Juju. And if he doesn't develop chemistry with these other guys to where he trusts them, I can see games. Look, last year, Juju with Antonio Brown out there had 3 games with double-digit catches. This year, that could be 6 or 7. There will be games where teams like the Patriots in week 1, maybe, can lock him down, and he has like 4 catches for 33 yards. And then we'll see if Roethlisberger can counterpunch. But there are going to be games when he has like 13 catches for 200 yards. When it's working, Roethlisberger's just going to keep going to him and going to him and going to him. Now, over the course of a season, that might make for a rocky ride. It might make you a little nauseous. But by the end of the season, if he has 120 or 130 catches, 1,600, 1,700 yards, that won't surprise me at all, because I think when the bullets are flying, Roethlisberger's going to think Juju, and then only if it's impossible to throw it to him will he look to somebody else.
I wouldn't mind if Juju was a 2,000-yard receiver. If we saw that first time in the NFL. It sounds great, Bloom, and I totally get what you're saying. I'd love to buy in. I
understand. And what I'm really counting on here is Roethlisberger not being a nuanced thinker as a passer. The Roethlisberger is going to stay in his comfort zone.
What you're counting on here is watching in the preseason or in training camp reports, like, is he vibing with anyone else?
Right.
Because if he doesn't, then Juju with 200 targets might be what we get. Now to the reserve receivers, which is very interesting because we're all watching. It's kind of like behind Devontae Adams, right? What is it? Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Is it Geronimo Allison? Well, here, in my opinion, it should be James Washington. It should be, but I was super disappointed in him as a rookie.
Yeah.
Not just the stat line, just like understanding offenses and getting open for James Washington. So it should be him, but it might end up being Deontay Johnson, the kid. What is it with me in Toledo? Reminds me of Emmanuel Sanders.
Yes.
A young Emmanuel Sanders. And then Dante Moncrief is there. So they have like this trio behind Juju, all talented in their own rights. Washington should be the guy to take the step, but Moncrief's there, refresh another team again. And then this kid, Deontay Johnson, very exciting young player.
Right. See, doesn't it just point to there not being a clear number 2 receiver? That, maybe in one game it's Washington, in another game it's Moncrief, in another game it's Johnson. As the year goes on, trending more to Johnson and maybe away from these other guys because they have distinct skill sets and applications, right? James Washington, you want winning at the catch point. You want James Washington on 50-50 balls. You want James Washington as a guy on downfield. And I guess they're not truly distinct because Dante Moncrief is similar. You want him on those back shoulder fades. You want him on go routes. He's got more athleticism, more straight line speed. So, he's the one that you want when a safety is spying on Juju or bracketing Juju, you want Moncrief flying behind them to maybe make a vertical route. But then you have Deontay Johnson, who, as you said, whether it's Emmanuel Sanders or Juju or Antonio Brown, this is Santonio Holmes. This is the kind of receiver that the Steelers have done very well developing during the Roethlisberger era. And I think he'll be developed quickly. And I think that he'll come on as the season goes on. So even though it seems like the number 2 receiver for the Steelers is a potential gold mine, I don't think it's going to be clear the answer of that coming out of camp in any given week. And maybe if there's someone that emerges by the end of the year, it's Johnson, but I'm not drafting him and waiting around for that because he's the real number 2 receiver might not be a wide receiver.
Yes, it might not be. We got a few reserve receivers to get to, just real quick.
Ken Griffey's kid.
Exactly. Trey Griffey, all these juniors, right? Ryan Switzer talk, anybody? Like, okay.
Right. Eli Rodgers. So that's the
tiniest catch radius. Here's the catch radius of like a laptop screen.
Right.
That's exactly Ryan Switzer. Like he'll get open against anybody. And then like, if you don't have it like right here, he won't catch it because he can't. He's a little guy.
Yeah. And it makes sense for Eli Rodgers and or Ryan Switzer for there to be some weeks that they're more featured in the game plan as those quick, shiftier slot receivers who can get open early. Like the Steelers are facing a team that might be able to get early pressure on Roethlisberger, then you want those guys who can get open earlier in routes like the slot receivers, which could also complicate the picture when you say who's Ben going to throw to other than Juju among the wide receivers. Well, sometimes that should be if the Steelers offense evolves. See, that question's in the background for everything. Will the Steelers offense evolve? If they're using the slot receivers more when called for, they are. We'll see.
We shall see. We shall see some tight end action without Jesse James this year. That's fine. As long as Vance McDonald can stay healthy. Bloom, you've been a champion of McDonald for years with the caveat of, he gets banged up a lot.
Right.
Now, without Jesse James, it's like that security blanket, right? Or the guarantee on the box and Tommy Boy. That's what Jesse James was. Because I got McDonald to catch passes. And if he's not there, Jesse James will do the job. Well, now he's not there. And Xavier Grimble is just a big blocker. Don't ask him to get covered by Will Parks. Anyway, Vance McDonald.
Right.
Upside, electricity to his game. Also an injury history that we want to ignore.
Yeah, we wanted to be excited about him at this time last year, and then he had a foot issue as soon as he showed up for camp. But he ended up being fine, and he ended up making a few highlight plays. And that's the thing. He adds value after the catch in a way that few tight ends do outside of like a Travis Kelce type. And he could easily be number 2 on this team in targets. When we're looking at existing chemistry, after Juju, it's Vance McDonald. And it may well be that when the bullets are flying, and McDonald is often the guy that is forgotten by defenses. And if that continues to happen, then McDonald could, if he stays healthy, have great returns on his ADP. Now, on the other hand, if you want to fade McDonald or you want to look elsewhere, Jesse James wasn't really that big of a part of the passing game in the second half of the year, and McDonald's numbers didn't exactly take off. Now, Antonio Brown was there, so that complicates things. So I think there's absolutely a case to take McDonald at ADP, and as a guy that could end up the season, if he plays 16 games, in the top 5 among the tight ends.
Leave it to the Steelers to take a 6'8" tight end that's not as strong as he needs to be at 265 and also drops a lot of passes.
But he was a quarterback, so maybe he's the next backup quarterback.
Maybe he's their Taysom Hill.
Yeah, but and by the way, on Grimble, the Steelers are pretty excited about him. And in the other negative scenario here that I can draw for McDonald is that Grimble just moves into Jesse James' role. And that Grimble is on the field like 30-40% of the time. And that also could hold down. So we're going to be watching him in the preseason as a player to fit into Vance McDonald's outlook. And then you mentioned Zach Gentry. Probably my least favorite pick of this year's draft. Sorry, Zach.
And that's a wrap for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the preseason watch list in the AFC North. We always love doing this. Good to go through this exercise as we exercise the demons and we talk about what's going to happen in this year in the National Football League. He's Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey. The show is at The Audible. Many thanks to y'all for listening on iTunes, subscribing, commenting, all that kind of good stuff. Also, same thing on our YouTube channel. We appreciate each and every one of you. For the great Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching and listening. Stay tuned. And as always, you better stay frosty.